What happens when two of the most plugged in people in digital care team up to make sense of the chaos? Welcome to Control Plus Care. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Katie.
This is your weekly briefing on the most important digital care updates. We're unpacking what you need to know this week in under 30 minutes. Well, first, Katie, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. It's a short week after the bank holiday. Had lots of sunshine then, obviously raining now, but a sunny August bank holiday can't be sniffed at. How about you?
No, it's still sunny here, and it is, you will be pleased to hear, the last week of the summer holidays.
I am really, really relieved for you and your sanity.
No, and today I won a real battle because after fighting with my 3-year-old all summer, today she's gone down for a nap, which any parents listening will be like, a 3-year-old who napped? She asked for it.
Oh my
So
goodness. Are
today's a
you,
good day.
has she been swapped with another child accidentally? It doesn't sound like her.
No, she was taken out this morning by her dad to the boatyard. So she's run pretty much nonstop for 3.5 hours and she was beat.
Amazing. Well, I pray for you for bedtime as well and that you can get a solid 6 to 7 hours of sleep at least.
Even better, I won't be here for bedtime. I'm going out tonight. So it's a win
Incredible.
all round for me.
The best day of Michelle's podcasting career so far.
Don't tell my husband.
Hmm.
Anywho, this isn't what we're here for as much as I do enjoy this. Let's crack on today because we've got big stories. We keep saying this all the time. The summer should be quiet and it hasn't been. So my first story today actually is one that has had people talking all week. I've spoken to so many people about it. And it's that Derby Council have started using AI. So the headline is AI decides when elderly people go into care. Mm,
Just quickly, AI klaxon should be going off metaphorically at this point.
Oh, we've gone in so strong.
Yeah.
So yes, Derby Council are, it seems, going full throttle and really strongly adopting AI. Um, there are two different things going on there, but essentially, the idea is that it's going to help manage demand. There will be some level of assessment, but those assessments will be checked by people. Um, and as ever, increasingly, like it does send off alarm bells for me. There's no getting away from the fact that councils are incredibly cash strapped. They are really, really struggling with budgets. Um, and Andy Appleyard, who's the DAS, the Director of Adult Social Care Services there, he even says, a quote from him in one of the articles was that taking out the financial side of things, our issue was that we had rising demand, we had significant backlogs, and we couldn't bring in more resources. So we needed to find a different way of doing things. And I would argue that doesn't take out the financial side of things. The reason you can't bring in more resources is because you are so cash strapped.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people are really upset about this, that this has been done very quickly. AI is such a new technology. And the
Hmm.
thing you and I talk about, Casey, is that, we don't have the data in the sector. We don't have this really robust data set that I would feel comfortable saying this tells us enough for it to be making decisions about the level of care people need. Just last week, we talked about a study that is proven that there is deep, deep bias in the data we do have, and that AI systems increasingly will tell us that men and women need different things with the same parameters because that bias is there. Um, and then, we've got the idea that humans are overseeing it. And again, we've got evidence that says where you have people who are more junior using AI to make decisions, that actually it's de-skilling them and making them worse at their job. So the example that I always come back to is radiologists, because there's really good, strong evidence there that shows us two things. That when people without 20, 30 years of experience as a radiologist use these tools to help them make decisions, they lose the skill and the discernment to make good decisions. And if that's happening in something that's a very mechanical choice, where it's softer, where it's, more
Yeah.
subjective, are we just really putting ourselves in a difficult position where we are relying on a system that I would really question, is it ready? Is the system ready for the software? And how long has the software been around and how much has it been tested?
Yeah, and I think that testing point is really important. I sort of, when I was reading the story, had two sort of areas that I was quite interested in. So they're exploring obviously the sort of AI digital front door to
Hmm.
council services. The one in Derby is called Darcy. Quite a lot of different councils are piloting this sort of software. And while one of the articles, I think, said that currently it's only 50% accurate in terms of referring people on to services, and particularly struggles with accents as well. I think there's a lot of evidence that something like a digital front door actually can be quite helpful. I'm thinking, in terms of as how do I contact my local council and what sort of things am I looking on the council website for? Obviously, this is not social care related necessarily, but the main things are I'm trying to understand when it's just been a bank holiday. What does that mean for my recycling days? How do I manage to find that on the council website? I'm trying to find out, what library services are available in more rural areas. These are all things which, being able to call up and have an AI tell me the answers to those questions, I'm absolutely fine with that, basically. It's just rather than doing a search on a council website, I'm instead finding the information, it's being told to me without me having to go through that extra step. So that sort of digital front door, I think for a lot of people, and I'm a millennial, and I'm sure many millennials who don't like to talk to people, great. Sounds fantastic. Brilliant. I think that's something which is really interesting. And when you're being trained on the council's own sort of data sets of information they already have, it's fairly closed loop. I can see where the benefits are there. And then that frees up people to spend more time with those people who do need support navigating
Hmm.
council services. I think that
Yeah.
could be a great option. The one where I get very, very concerned is when we're talking about the use of AI to and automation when it comes to needs assessments and financial assessments and that sort of thing. And I do think there are opportunities here. I'm not a blanket no against this. I just worry that the quality of the data that it's being trained on, in terms of the data we have in the system, means that the outputs might be quite biased. And while they're still being checked by a person, when you've got people who are incredibly time poor, who don't necessarily receive the training on how to spot bias, that they may sort of take what a computer outputs and say, okay, well, it must know something that I don't know. So we will go with that. And we don't know for sure. That evaluation and testing piece is where we can really check that. Is it that when we do automated needs assessments using AI over a period of time, we can actually evidence that that is better and more accurate than a person going out and doing that assessment? Does it mean that there will be better outcomes for people? Do they get the services that they need? And then, therefore, is that efficiency something which is worthwhile doing because it's not just efficient for the system and cost saving, but actually has better outcomes? Brilliant. I'm all for it. That would be fantastic. I'm just not completely convinced that we're there yet at all in terms of being able to say that that's definitely something which can happen.
Yeah, and I mean, just from the most basic points of that, what you've made there, if I had a staff member who was only correct 50% of the time, I'd be like, there's a real skill and training need here. Or maybe this isn't the job for them.
Hmm.
Um, and I agree completely on the assessments. What I want to see is us doing the two things in tandem and testing it and really safeguarding people and proving where decisions are good or decisions are bad, because also decisions good, decisions bad is a hard thing to say. You can have two, 25-year career social workers go and do an assessment and come up with very different outputs. Now, I'm okay with that because I am asking a human to use their discernment and use their skills and their experience to make a decision. The fact that they make different decisions does not give me major concern when a computer is telling us something very different than a person. And as you say, those people are time poor. They are, incredibly overstretched. It is probably easier to say, we'll just go with what the computer says.
Hmm.
What are the safeguards and what are the fallbacks for families? How much transparency has there been with people that this is how decisions are being made?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is exactly the difference between two social workers coming up with two different sort of outputs as opposed to a social worker and a piece of AI technology coming out with different outputs. The two social workers can both explain their thought process and how they reach that decision. Black boxing with AI means that we don't necessarily know why it's come to that decision. That transparency isn't necessarily there. And I think that's where a lot of the trust is going to be kind of lost with people if we're not careful with AI. I've been really interested with this story in particular because it got mainstream media pickup. We saw it in the Telegraph, saw it in the Express. Quite dramatic headlines, I would say.
Big, shouty outrage. But, I don't think that betrays the depth of feeling. Like the professionals and our colleagues that we've been speaking to over the last few days about this story all are deeply uncomfortable with it. And
Mm,
I think, none of us are naive to the fact that increasing demand and increasing complexity of care needs isn't going anywhere. There is no magic money tree. We are not going to suddenly have, reams and reams of staff to come and address this. We have to do things differently. But implementing systems like this that are not adequately tested, that are working on an immature data set, is it just a race to the bottom? Are we going to really risk the quality of care that we deliver to people?
exactly. And so, I sort of think with this sort of thing for me, if they could say, this is something we're piloting, this is the safeguards that we have. And I'll be honest, I've read the, mainstream media headlines on this. All of these things may well be available, I'm sure, if you speak to any of the councils trialing this technology. But, that sort of transparency about how we're safeguarding it, how is the staff training happening, what is the sort of break points in this pilot at which we go, okay, we've tried this, didn't work, or we've tried this and it is working, and so therefore we're going to scale. Those are all things I think we need to be making sure are in place to kind of maintain that trust realistically. Because as you say, things do need to change. So, we are going to have to look at this kind of technology as an option.
Absolutely. And, we do this job because we really believe that technology and digital is the future of care. I just don't want to see things rushed. And then we lose the opportunity. We don't get to do this twice.
No,
If
definitely
something
not.
goes horribly wrong and the outcomes are poor for individuals and trust, as you say, is lost, we don't get to try this again.
No, exactly. Heavy one, that
It's,
one.
it is. And it's something that we'll be watching really carefully and we'll probably come back and talk about again.
Yeah, almost certainly. So, the next article that I wanted to talk about is a little bit rogue for this podcast because the original article actually isn't about technology at all. But it's about design is key to meeting the needs of an aging population. And it's an article in the Care Home Professional magazine all about building new residential care services, the way that you can approach design so that it's more inclusive, so that it really fosters social connection and social environments. And it really got me thinking. It's a great article, by the way, if you're thinking of, knowing more about building design for residential settings. But it got me thinking about a conversation we had, I think, a couple of episodes ago about sort of that basic digital infrastructure, which is missing. And actually, the majority of the residential care housing stock is old. I think, like we say, over 50% was built pre 1950. It's not designed for a digital future. So, where we're building new buildings, purpose built for the future, I think it's sort of important for us to think through what does that mean as well in terms of the technology, not only that's available now, but which could potentially be there in 10, 20 years' time. We don't build buildings just for now. Hopefully, they will have a several hundred-year lifespan. That's sort of the goal. And I think what's quite interesting about sort of the designing for the future space is that we need to be thinking about not just the sort of internet connectivity demands for right now, but also the exponential growth in terms of what amount of internet connectivity we might have. So there are still many care services out there I know who are still using a router that you pick up at Curry's, sort of home broadband thing, and that might be good enough for the office. But if you have all of your residents who want to be doing FaceTime or video calls with their family members, they want to be streaming Netflix or BBC iPlayer or anything like that, that's no longer good enough. You need a more robust internet connection. If we're then layering on top of that sensor technology, acoustic monitoring technologies, a variety of different kinds of tech that has an increasing sort of energy usage, increasing demands on the connectivity, increasing demands as well for plug and like connectivity options within a room. Do you want to have the option where for some what a particular resident who might be at risk of falls, they can choose to have some form of sensor technology in their room. But then when the next resident comes in using that same room, they don't want to have that piece of tech. You can switch it on and off. You don't have to be knocking a new hole into your wall, right, every single time. So, I mean, I'm not obviously in construction, I'm not a builder, but I think more and more it's something that the construction industry for social care is going to have to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? So again, also not a builder, also not a designer, but have done some work with local authorities around, the lifetime standards. When we're building new houses, we should be building them with a future of disability in mind. So things like the width of doors, things like the ability to put in a stair lift, they all should be considered
Mm.
for new builds because we want people to stay at home. The plug socket one really grinds my gears because, well, as a mum with children with many devices, I can only imagine how much worse that is when you've got an individual living in a care home with, potentially 4, 5, 6 different devices monitoring their care on top of they're going to have a tablet and a phone. I had a family member last year who was moving into a supported accommodation, and there was a big red sticker on the plug next to the bed saying for equipment only. And then we were like, "Well, where does he plug in his phone? We can't use that one." I'm like, "Well, everyone plugs in the not you, Katie, we know you don't have phones in the bedroom, but everyone else in the UK plugs their phone in next to their bed."
Yeah, we can
And
come back to my like massive like high horse about why you shouldn't have devices next to your bed in another podcast episode.
Katie Thorne is a better person than all of us is all we need to know.
No, just more easily distracted. I would never sleep. I have to have it in a different room to me.
But I think, we talk about it in cybersecurity, we talk about secure by design, we talk about co-producing services with people, but we very rarely talk about building things now that can do tech later. And I just thought it was really interesting that our needs change not just physically but also digitally.
Yeah, definitely true. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to hear from anybody if people want to leave comments or get in touch with us as well about sort of any approaches that you're taking to like new builds within the social care sector. I think it's a very interesting space.
So my next story is also, again, digital adjacent more than
Hmm.
fully digital. Essentially, the NHS have announced a brand new health data research service, which is really, really exciting. Anyone who speaks to me for more than about 5 minutes, all digital conversations lead to data conversations, if I'm honest. If we think about the NHS as the amount of data that it holds, incredible amounts of data about people's health. Until this point, any researcher wanting to access that would have to go to all the various systems, all the various places that that information is held, navigate multiple approval processes just to get hold of, the data that they need to conduct research. This service is going to do away with all that. It's essentially going to create a single secure gateway for all health and it says care data.
Hmm.
So that is really exciting. Hopefully, what that means for researchers is then that they'll be able to go to one place and work in what's called a secure environment. So, for those that don't know, a secure environment is basically a room where the data is held locally so that, there's no issues with data being transferred anywhere and the cyber risks associated with that. It has really robust governance. So, we know who can do what with what data. Going back to that point around transparency and trust, you can be
Hmm.
really confident that your data is being used by the people that you're happy for it to be used by in a way that it's supposed to be. And then it makes sure that we are only using that data for legitimate research purposes that benefit patients and the public. And, from that, we might get faster clinical trials. We'll get, advanced ways of using diagnostic data because for diagnostic data, the more you have of it, the better you get at diagnosing things, which, improves then our ability to find and treat complex diseases. So really exciting and very, very early. But, we keep coming back to the 10-year plan. There are ambitions in there around, for example, mapping the like universal mapping of newborn genomes. That is a phenomenal amount of data. Genome England already are one of the biggest data storage organizations, I think, in the world, let alone just in the UK. That's going to grow. And having something like this means that researchers have access to that, that enables them to really use that information to its full potential.
Yeah, I just think this is potentially really, really exciting. I think having been quite lucky to work with the Vivaldi study for the last couple of years, which was set up during COVID, which was really looking at using social care data for the first time on a mass scale to really understand sort of public outbreaks of viruses and flu and infection and all of this sort of thing. Like there are so many opportunities that can come from having these really robust data sets. So I think definitely going to be one to watch. I mean, when you say new, it's so new that they are currently looking for a chief exec. I think they haven't even started discovery on this piece of work. So anybody who is looking for a new chief executive officer role and you want to apply, I'm sure you may as well throw your hat in the ring. But I think this really has the potential to really make a difference in so many people's lives.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Very, very so. And then final, very brief one from me, just because I wanted to talk about a recent article on 5 key lessons on AI and social care. AI Klaxon again, but from friend of the podcast, Dr. Caroline Green at the Institute of Ethics and AI at Oxford University. I think people who are familiar with the work we do at Digital Care Hub know that we've been doing a lot of work with Caroline and the Institute and Daniel Casson at Casson Consulting and lots of organizations from across social care to sort of really understand what the benefits of artificial intelligence could be, what the risks are. We've published, co-produced guidance, worked a lot with people with lived experience, and think local act personal and others in the care workers charity to really sort of start thinking this through. And there's a really great summary article of a recent lecture that Caroline did, really talking about how we can think about AI in terms of the opportunity, how we can talk about it in terms of maintaining data privacy as a real key sort of piece of regulation, which is already in place around AI, and we all need to be thinking about. And I think always having sort of top 5 tips is quite helpful, practical resources for people.
Yeah, because everyone's busy and
Hmm.
AI isn't everyone's job and they just want the information that they need. So this has been a great article. And, you know, Caroline's such an expert in this area and has really led a conversation that I would say has been a great example of how our sector can come together and all tackle something head on. Um, so to see that come into fruition and becoming things that are available just for providers to just pick up and use is brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll make sure, obviously, that the links to that are all in the show notes for you guys.
But that's our big news stories this week. And for those who've been listening for the past few weeks, you'll know that we have a segment at the very end called Cyber Squirrels. You have to listen back to the first episode to understand what that's about. But essentially, it's our opportunity to find stories that are, pleasant, fun, a little bit different, a little bit interesting, things that kind of aren't really, there's no direct line to social care, but when we've read them, we've gone, oh, we found
Mhm.
that interesting, so we want to bring it and share it with you. And Casey, you've come across one this week that has really blown my mind.
Genuinely, I thought that at one point I might be having a kind of nervous breakdown as I was doing this one, to be honest with you. So, because I am a very cool and interesting person, I found myself this week searching funny technology stories, time limited, just within the past week. I want to be up to date for you guys. I was kind of clicking through and seeing the different ones that are out there, and came across one of those listicle websites, which is saying, these are the top 10 most algorithmically trending articles of this week about tech. I'm like, cool, what were they? And I see one, and it says that there has been the first ever astronaut to do a selfie while on a spacewalk, and that this picture is going completely viral across all platforms. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. I'm quite online though, and I have somehow missed this incredibly viral photo moment by a female astronaut, apparently called Amara Chen. And the article that I was reading didn't have any links to it. And I was like, okay, weird. I'll go try and find this photo, this selfie that's apparently breaking the internet, Kim Kardashian style. And so, like, I just, Google, like, Amara Chen astronaut selfie, and all that comes up are like TikTok videos, YouTube videos, and other sort of like those listicle sites, which are just AI generated. It's not a person that's creating any of these things. And I was like, and it was like an endless, like hundreds of thousands of results of AI generated images, which are really, really good images. Like they looked really accurate of this supposed astronaut who's taking a selfie. But they're all slightly different. Like if you hadn't been looking through multiples of them, I wouldn't have realized that it's not the same person. They're all different AI generated people. And then, so I was like, okay, well, I'll go and see if like the BBC's got anything about this. No, I went on the NASA website and the International Space Station website because apparently this astronaut like works on the International Space Station. And it got to the point because I was like, am I going mad? Why can I not find this astronaut? There's no female astronauts currently on the ISS. The recent SpaceX launch also didn't have any female astronauts on it. This doesn't exist. This video, this selfie never existed. I can't find who created this story in the first place. It's just AI speaking to AI that has created, and the purpose of it, I don't know, but I just thought I was going down such a rabbit hole of just make believe and bots talking to each other about this thing. Wild experience.
There's a few things here, Katie. Firstly, I admire
Hmm.
the tenacity at which you went down this rabbit hole. You went to Wonderlands and beyond.
Huh, yeah.
So well done you, because I am almost certain that with my attention span, I'd have seen that first picture and been like, seems legit. and I think that's really telling because a lot of people would have never asked the question. And also, I think people are probably still thinking of AI pictures as they were kind of 6 months ago, not a long time ago, where we're talking 6 fingers and 13 numbers on the clock. The sophistication at which pictures can be rendered now, it's almost
Uh,
untellable.
if I'd been skimming through, I absolutely would have believed it was a real photograph. Like, not a shadow of a doubt. It was just because there was multiple in slightly different angles. Also, in one of them, Amara Chen appeared to be Southeast Asian, and another one somewhere from an Indian subcontinent. Like, these were not the same woman. But if you had just read that one article,
Because who's reading it more than once?
exactly, you wouldn't have known, you
I
know.
It's baffling, and again, these little red flags that tell us there is something rotten in the state of Denmark. Like
Hmm.
these are things we have to be so vigilant about. But then they're so new. How do you don't know to be vigilant about completely AI generated stories for no discernible purpose?
Yeah, that was the thing I think that I found baffling. I've seen a lot of AI generated content, and most of the time I understand why, right? But because there never seemed to be a human involved in any of these, like the tweets that I looked at, none of those were real people. It was a really, really baffling, like stumbling on, you've heard of dead internet theory, just
Yeah.
genuinely stumbling into that completely organically.
It's just like the snake eating itself, isn't it? Like it's not for anyone or by anyone. So it's almost like despite us as people. Oh, it gives me the ick, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is a little bit of the ick, but also if the bots are talking to themselves, they're just talking about made up things. So maybe you don't need to worry that they're planning world domination yet.
No, not yet. At the moment it's frivolous, but we gotta watch.
We do. So I think that's probably our cyber squirrel for the
Okay.
week.
I feel like you said you felt you were having a nervous breakdown on the story. I feel like I'm like really discombobulated just having like relived it with you.
Yeah, I will send you some of the images if you want. They're good. I'll show you.
Okay. Look forward to it. So that's everything for this week. Come back next week where we'll be discussing the latest in digital care news. So, what happens when two plugged in people team up to demystify digital care? You get control plus care.
Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts. All of the links mentioned today, apart from the AI slop, will be in the show notes.
And tell a colleague, preferably before they break ground on their new care home.